Okay, let's get this door back on the front. Now I did glue down the edge of that leather that was lifted slightly and push that back into place so it's less likely to be caught on a thumbnail and torn up, so that was good. So what do I want to do? Well, normally I use a little touch of grease on there and there, and I use that to a large extent just to hold these cartridge paper washers in place while I'm struggling to get this back on the camera. They just stay tucked into the grease there quite nicely. Just needs a smear just to get that in position. I'm going to put a little smear of grease on here. That's where it clips into. Just make sure that this little arm that's going to couple to the shutter is back up out of the way where it should be. Now normally I hook the door on to the top slot, then stretch it down and pop it into the bottom slot, just like that. Then we simply have a screw at each of the top and bottom positions for the hinge pin. I'll just have to line that up, drop a screw in and do it up. Same on the bottom of the camera. Check the door opens and closes. Whoops, got to flip that. Flip this lever that connects to the shutter. I have to make sure that's flipped forward. That's good, that works well. A little bit more lubricant to the struts, just a dob there and in that slot there, and for good measure I'll just make sure some gets into this little recess, little cutaway. And that's the door done and dusted. So what's next on here? I think the leather on the base, we don't need access to this anymore, we've done there. So get a clean cotton bud, a little bit of thinners, and I'll just wipe this. Now what I'm doing here is I'm removing any greasy marks that I've left on there while I've been working on the camera, because of course I've been handling it and spreading grease and dirt all left, right and centre. Right, so here's our piece of leather from the base. That's still nice and clean. So I apply some adhesive to the leather. And carefully spread it out, making sure it gets to the edges. I've probably got a bit much on here, been a bit too generous looking at the way that's spreading out. You can see the colour change in the leather as it soaks in. Wipe off a bit of that excess. It looks a bit light. That looks good. Just making sure all the holes are clear. Now I'm going to do something here. I'm going to take my stick from the grease pot, just run it around the inside of that hole there, just to make sure that it doesn't glue itself to that button. So drop this in place. The leather's always shrunken a bit with age, so it needs to be pushed firmly down around that post. Make sure that it's seated correctly and smoothly all the way around. And that's it. Now it needs its depth of field scale. Alright, I'll turn my paper over because I've got glue everywhere now and everything wants to stick to it. Here are our components for this. You can see there's some green verdigris there. It's corrosion products of the brass, because these components are brass under the chrome plating. So I just have to make sure I remove all traces of the old grease and dirt. On each of these components. This spring is only nickel plated steel spring. Often that's a little bit corroded. Major rust should be removed from it, scraped off. It's a hidden component, so you don't have to be too fancy about it. And then a bit of grease, it'll be as good as new. Okay, so there's our components. Put a little bit of grease onto that spring. It's a wavy washer. Contacts in 4 places on both sides. I'll put a little smear of grease around here. And it really needs very little. That's just so it isn't rough. That part fits in there. That part fits in there. And on the base of the camera, this piece fits there like that. Our ring fits over the top. I run my tweezers down to find the hole. Drop in the screw. Well, that was just a battery going flat. It seems to be the story of my life. The good thing about retinas, they don't have batteries, so they don't go flat. Right, so we've got one screw in. Let's line up the second hole. Get the second screw in place. Do those screws up snug. Check the depth of field scale does indeed rotate. It's obviously not my day with batteries today, that was the other one went flat. Alright, both screws done up tight. We're finished at the bottom of the camera. Can work on the top of the camera now. There's not much more to go on there, but one thing I do need to do is clean up the viewfinder glass, the front and rear elements for the viewfinder, and reinstall those. So I'll get onto that. There's our top. Here are the two pieces of metal that we're most interested in, and now I have to find the pieces of glass. There are two pieces of glass, of course. Let's turn this over and start with a fresh piece. Here we go. So I'll get a cotton bud with some glass cleaner. I'll clean those pieces of glass and then we'll fight them into position. It's always a bit of a wriggle, but oh well. If it was an easy job, they wouldn't need experts. Let's go. So, I'll do all edges and faces of this piece of glass. It'll have picked up grease and dirt, and as I wipe it down clean, I don't want to be wiping more dirt onto it. So let's see how we go. You can see the marks from it coming off there. Alright. I'll just hold that up to the light and see what I've got. Yes, that looks very good. The other piece, this is small, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if you can't even see it. Let's do that. That's the convex surface, that's the one that goes inwards. This is the flat surface that goes to the back. Now, wriggling these into the body. I'll start with that piece. Slide it into position. Take that locating spring. Pop that into position. Then we have to get this rear glass into position. So it has to be trapped between the top and those two upright sections there, which you may just be able to see. It's entertaining. See how we get on. I'll move one of those slightly forward. Oh, so I'm trying to do this without creating a lot of dirty marks on the glass myself. Alright, so I have that started under one of the two clips. Now I'm going to try and lift the other clip and get it started under there as well. It's a slightly fraught process. But it can be done. We have it. Okay. So our rear glass and the front glass are all in place. I'll check them closely before I put the cover on to make sure that I didn't put any unpleasant marks on there. There's a little bit of a mark there I don't like the look of in that rear lens. I'll just see if it will polish off. I don't want to take that back out to deal with it. That's pretty good. And it's infinitely better than it was when we started. Right, so that cover goes on and it just sort of pushes into place. It'll just stay there, sort of just sprung into place. So there's our top cover ready to go back. So what have we got left? Well, we have the frame counter. So I'll just pull that to bits. Now take a look at this. The short side here is on the outside. The longer side is on there. There has to be quite a bit of friction between these components. Otherwise, when you set the frame counter, it wouldn't stay set. It would get knocked or bumped, or you would never have much idea of how much film you had left. I'm putting a bit of molybdenum in here. Doesn't need much. Push that on there. I'll put a little bit of grease on the inside, because that goes on the shaft. I'll put a little bit of grease on the outside where that spring fits. Usually those springs are a fairly snug fit and they will stay where they're put. That's a bit better. Yeah. Where are we in the picture? We're about there. Okay. So the frame counter goes on there. We have to get the top cover on. So it's sort of a reverse of taking the thing apart. I want to get this rewind tab through the slot in the cover first. So I've got to rotate the sprocket, and I can depress the shutter release, and I can pop the top straight back over the top. There it is. That's that done. So there are 2 screws wanted. Well, we only had 1 screw because there was 1 missing to start off with. So we'll pop 1 screw in, and then I'll do a search and find a replacement for the missing screw. That's a fairly flat looking screw. I think we might pop that there, because I'm not sure that my other screws are quite so flat. That's that. And we want another screw. A chrome screw, nice and pretty. Let's see what I've got. That's a pretty close match too. Alright. There's our top cover back on. Our shutter release button can be screwed back in place. and I won't use tools to hold that back on there. I'm just going to give that a little tweak with my fingers, because it doesn't need to be done up too tight. So that's good. Now I'm going to look at this advanced knob, because as I said, there was a line on the top of that housing, and I can see that that certainly does rub on there. Now there was a washer that I thought was a bit strange looking. I'm going to see if I can find a better washer. I was able to find a more convincing looking washer. I'm happier with that than the original, because it's closer to the size of that edge, of that whole lever, knob rather. So we'll pop that on there. I'll run that down with my fingers, and I want to see how close it is to the top. So I've done it up tight, and I'm just looking to see what sort of gap I've got here at the top. See if that knob contacts the top cover at all, and it doesn't. So that tells me that that washer's a very good fit, and I'm done there. So I'm going to rotate my film advance, get my spanner on there, just do that up snug. It only needs to be done up as tight as you can do it with your fingers. So the camera body's been dealt with, and the next task is to do the shutter and reinstall that. While I've been working on this, I've discovered more about that scuff mark on the inside. Now very likely that's been scuffed off during the previous repair, when this arm was allowed to flop back, and then when the front was closed it would just scuff straight onto that, remove that paint. So there we have it. There's our camera, just waiting for me to do the shutter and reinstall it. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching.